Hello, I'm Jereme Kent with One Energy, and today for our Safety Minute, we're going to talk about what a real trauma kit should look like. I'm never surprised by what people think a first aid kit is. Often on wind farms, we're working with extremely minimal support from the outside world. We could be tens or dozens of miles away from the closest ambulance. We're in an environment where we're up tower, we're out in the middle of fields building new roads. And so if the worst thing possible, an injury ever happens, we want to make sure that our people are trained and equipped to help them. We see people show up with things like little prepackaged first aid kits that come with their vehicle or to meet DOT requirements and say, we've got a trauma kit on site or a good first aid kit. We even see people who have the wall boxes that we're all used to seeing, the 100-person wall box that has all the nice little package things saying they've got a real first aid or a trauma kit. None of those things were designed to deal with the real accident on site. It's important that when you're talking about what makes sense for a real trauma kit on site, you take the time to put together what you're really going to need in the event of emergency, and you make sure your people are trained on it. With that, I will show you what One Energy considers to be a trauma kit. This is the minimum first aid kit we have on site anytime that we're doing work. Our more advanced kits that our EMTs and advanced EMTs use is significantly more in depth than this, but this is what we consider the minimum and everybody on site is trained to use. So I'm going to run through what's in this kit, and I'm going to show you how to use really briefly some of these things in this kit. For that, I have Darshan, one of our field engineers, who I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate very quickly some of the stuff on here that we have. For today, Darshan is our clumsy field engineer. First, it's important to make sure that you're in a backpack that is able to do well with moisture and some water that naturally happens. It's also important to make sure when you're doing this that you have a kit that's easy to find and easy to locate things that are in there. For example, it has bright orange outlines, clearly is an EMS kit, and then we put a flashlight on the outside. So we have the flashlight on the outside. That's a nice big bright flashlight, so if it's early in the morning or late in the day, you can see what's going on. And next, we have PPE. We have a whole bunch of gloves, and we have face masks, and this is not a COVID face mask. This is a actual first aid. When you're dealing with this and the person's either spitting blood or you're going to be dealing with them and you want to protect yourself, that's proper body substance isolation in that kit. Then, when we open this kit, we get to all the stuff that we have. We have some basic medications we'll go through. We have some basic tools. The first thing you see is an AED. All of a sudden, when Darshan's having a heart attack, I've got that AED right there. It's not kept in a separate case. It's easy to test and see what's going on. Next to that AED, I also need to, of course, have the patches for that AED. So I've got the patches for the AED, and you always have two sets of patches. I don't know, Darshan may have the hairiest chest out there. If I open up his chest and put the first patch on, it might not work well. And you know what you do in an emergency? You rip those patches off and you put the next set of patches right back on. There may also be a problem with the patches, or there may be a problem with how they get stuck or not sticking well. So I always make sure I have two sets of those patches for the AED. Then I have a bag valve mask. The reason this bag valve mask is important is that when you talk about CPR, I don't know if he's about to throw up when I'm doing CPR on him. Most people do. I don't want to have to try to use one of those little mouth barriers. They aren't nearly as effective and they're much harder to use. You can be trained on how to use a bag valve mask without becoming an EMT or anything else. Most of your CPR classes are happy to teach this, especially if you do CPR for the professional rescuer. And now I've got a bag valve mask that I can use on Darshan without having to use mouth to mouth, and I can go ahead and give him rescue breaths. And that's all packaged in that nice little hard case. Next, because we do have some EMTs, we have a blood pressure cuff and a stethoscope. If you don't have EMTs, you probably don't need this part, but a blood pressure cuff and a stethoscope gives us more tools in the field to figure out what we need. I've got scissors so that I can cut his clothes if I need to. If Darshan hurts his leg and I need to be able to see what's going on, I can go ahead and cut up and expose to see what's going on. I can also use this to make bandages or anything else that I need. I've got tweezers. Tweezers are for when someone gets something stuck in there from a heavy wood timber or anything else, but that way I've got basic first aid kit with the tweezers. I have a pen so I can write down what's going on. I have a pen light, so if you're an EMT, well, this just shows why this kit was only picked, because it's time to do its annual checkup on it, and it's a dead pen light. But this is, as an EMT, I can go ahead and check his pupil responsiveness, or just at night, it's one more flashlight to be able to see what's going on. We then have some basic medication. Some of this medication anybody can give, some of it you have to be an EMT to do, but we have aspirin, so being able to give chewable aspirin in the event of a heart attack. We have Motrin, we have Tylenol as some basic medicine. We have some very simple disposable thermometers that are in there. we have a sugar packet. So essentially this is a glucose packet. It's called Elevate Glucose Slim Pack, but it's a way to give a dose of glucose to somebody who's having a diabetic problem or needs sugar. And then we have Benadryl in case the person's having an allergic reaction. Again, for our EMTs, we have oral pharyngeal airways and nasal airways. Again, you can't use those without going through EMT training, but that's an important thing to help a patient. Here's the part that really is important though for most of what you're going to see in the field. It's a big trauma kit, okay? This is bigger than most people's first aid kit, and it does a few important things. It gives you the ability to stop a real wound. So you want it in some container that's nice and waterproof and safe that you can open up when you need to. We like to vacuum bag our stuff. And I have a range of different sizes of gauze pads. These are big gauze pads. This is our small stuff, is the 4x4s. That's great for there's an arm that has a problem that I can go ahead and put that gauze pad on. As they get to bigger, I've got combi pads and abdominal pads. That's for a much bigger injury. That's for something that's coming through on his chest or anything else. Didn't mean to get you there, just pretending we're injured. But I can apply firm pressure with it. So you've got much bigger gauze pads. We carry Instaclot and combat gauze, so you can sit there if you need to on a really bad wound that you're having a hard time controlling bleeding on, and you can apply direct pressure with this, and that helps stop the bleeding. We have big wraps to wrap stuff up. So this is the 4-inch wrap that we use to go ahead and be able to self-stick to itself. There's a whole bunch of different ones that are, this is Dynarex with the sensor wrap, but it's the same concept of wraps that stick to themselves. So I can really quickly put this gauze onto Darshan's hand and wrap this around and get a real nice good pressure dressing on there, and it's going to stay and last in the field, not some cute little thing of tape that we hope is going to work. I've got the really big pad, so this is the big abdominal pad. This is when there's a big nasty injury somewhere and we just need to put all the gauze on it that we can. We've got a Curlex wrap, so we can sit there and wrap around an injury to create a bandage. All of this is stuff that you need to stop it. Think about injuries that you see on wind farms. You see people losing fingers, losing hands, getting a major crush injury. You see somebody who has a really bad injury, and there can be a lot of blood. You aren't going to stop it with two little squares like this. Then we all carry tourniquets. A lot of people have been told about tourniquets over their life is that tourniquets are bad. That's not correct anymore. The right tourniquets are designed to be applied for 2 to 4 hours without damaging the limb that they're put on. So with this tourniquet, I can open it up and I can quickly cut off all of the blood flow to Darshan's arms or to his legs to go ahead and stop any wound that's distal to that. Then you need some sort of eye wash or rinse. We like to carry IV bags for this, but any good bottle of sterile eye wash is great because you can sit there, I can cut a tip off, and I can say, look up Darshan, and I can rinse out all of his eyes. So with that, I've got the ability to do that, or I can do wound wash, and you can get a little bit of pressure when you have a bag like this, so you can squeeze on it and get a little bit of pressure to clean out that wound before you dress it. Then we have our stuff to splint. So when we need to splint, when Darshan has a problem and says, I think I just broke my wrist, we carry SAM splints. So with that SAM splint, I'm able to take his hand, and I can splint his entire hand like this, or I can splint his hand down in here like this and protect it to get it to the hospital and then wrap it, or I can splint his elbow or do whatever else. But you can learn splinting in a basic first aid class. If you don't have the tools there, you aren't going to be able to splint. With that, we have some 2 triangular bandages to be able to do a shoulder splint for a shoulder injury, and 1 more of that big pad of that self-adhesive wrap. Then we have our big open cloth, because sometimes when you're dealing with an issue and you want just a clean area to work, because we know there aren't a lot of clean areas to work, being able to lay out a sterile drape and work on cleaning somebody's hand right here and then put a bandage on it, that gives you your clean spot and it's nice and easy to clean up. And then we have a reflective blanket, so if that person's cold, I can go ahead and put the reflective blanket around them to try to get them warm again or help start the warming process. Finally, oh, I missed this earlier. With the pads, anytime we have the AED pads, we have prep razors. So this is what a prep razor looks like. So when we find Darshan's hairy chest, right, we can take this and we can use that as a prep razor to quickly clean that hair off. They're great. They cost about $1 a piece. Finally, we have what most people would consider to be a first aid kit. This is one of the things later in here because you can take a second to get to it. And this has the really basic stuff. This has some alcohol pads. This has some iodine wipes for something that's a little bit nastier. It has some first aid cream and some burn cream in it. It has some steri strips for getting minor wounds. We then have some Band-Aids, just basic Band-Aid type stuff. We have some slightly larger Band-Aids. We have some clear Tegaderm, which is just something that we use for IV starting, but you can use it for all kinds of other wounds. When you want to be able to see the wound, it's a see-through wound dressing. We have some non-adherent pads. So this is that small gauze for that little stuff. I cut my finger, I have a decent gash, I need to go get looked at, but I want to put a bandage on it first. And then we have these great wound dressings. So there's a bordered wound dressing, and there's this Duoderm CGF. We love this stuff because this is a bandage that's designed to stay on for days. So it's a much more expensive bandage, but you can cut it to what the wound is and put it on, and it can stay on through showers to everything else, and it allows the proper breathing. Most bandages need to be changed every day or more often to make sure they don't end up with an infection. These are designed on a properly clean wound to stay on for a long time. And we found they're great because not everybody in the field is great at taking care of rinsing their bandage. So if you're going to put a bandage on somebody for a wound, even if it's a minor cut that you think could get worse, you want to see that again the next day. With this, we're able to clean it, put it on, and monitor it externally. But either way, make sure you're taking care of that so that a simple first aid case doesn't become a recordable case when they get an infection. This may seem like a lot, but this entire bag outside of the AED probably costs us about $250 or $300. We assemble them ourselves, so you can buy all these parts online, right? You can buy much bigger bags like this that are pre-built. But having a kit like that on site gives me a chance to actually help Darshan when there's an emergency, or anybody else that works for us. So I encourage you, strongly rethink what your trauma kit looks like, especially when you're on bigger and larger projects or high-risk projects. With that, I'm Jereme Kent. This has been a Safety Minute. Stay safe.